David, does the education system prepare our children for the future they are due to face?
Does it? That's interesting. Yes, we have our opinion and people have theirs opinion. I just want to put a point though. I was reading this week about they did a research in America in the, I think around the 70s. And they call it the crisis of democracy. Have you heard of it? It's called the crisis of democracy. They were looking at America. These were intellectuals looking at America and saying, this is not working for us in the sense that the young are calling for too much rights. They're getting involved in politics. Women are standing up for their rights, and people were talking against the war. And they saw that the people and the general public are getting too involved in democracy. And so now they said we've got to work on now to deal with this. And what they said was we have to look at the institutions responsible for the indoctrination of the youth, which was schools and churches. We got to now have more control over that and influence in those areas. And thus we see the state of schools today in America and here. And also, there's no accident in terms of going here now with it, in terms of student loans and that stuff. They're putting that pressure on that kind of mind of person, because we know in the 60s and 70s, those ones were rising up against in revolutionary forces, against the wars, against Vietnam. It was them.
Yes. Because much of the Black Panther work took place on the college campuses.
That's it.
And they weren't bogged down with hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of debt.
They compete with the status quo.
And Martin Luther King, he wasn't initially talking against the war. And when he was discussing with the people around him at the time about going that area, they said, don't go there. Don't go there. It was because he was looking out in the community and seeing the young, the Black Panthers, I forgot his name, Carmichael, is it Carmichael? They were getting the influence of the youth because they're dealing with real issues like the war. He had to now move in that area. It was the young, it was the Black Panthers that now we have to start speaking into. The church was saying no. The government was saying no, but he had to now know that he had to put his foot in the current and say, no, this is what people want to hear. I have to go there.
Because this is what they were doing.
Yes.
And he felt, because he's that kind of man. And in truth, when I took some time out to really look and listen to some of the speeches that they don't play.
Right.
And he's the kind of man that when they ask you, he's just not backing up. It's like, I'm just going. Like, that's the kind of soldier. People don't really understand the kind of warrior that Martin Luther King was.
There's very little played from his.
They don't really get that. That's a soldier. Like he knew what he was getting into, but can't back up. It's just not possible. It's not in me to do such.
So that then there was an agenda. There's always been an agenda, but now a more fervent agenda to create an environment of having a populace that's passive.
Absolutely.
Self-centered. Just think about buying stuff and TV, but don't want to get involved in important things like government and stuff. Like things like, I have apathy and don't think they can have any influence in society.
But that's, sorry, please don't let me use your train, but it doesn't seem like a new thing. Because if you like in slavery, if they beat the slave next to you, they don't want you worrying about, like, that's not right, boss. Like, you can't say they made it so. We're individuals in slavery. Like, let's keep your head down. It's, I'm very sad that George just got whipped to within an inch of his life. But if I even show that I felt that, they might drag me out there for something. So it's kind of like rebranding that same kind of individualism. And I think it's what you said. It's like they had it at a level. Then they started to see changes in the
consciousness.
That's right. The changes in the consciousness, and then they've come up with a new system. They come up with something new. And I think really what we're talking about here today is we see changes, but don't necessarily respond with that same scientific understanding.
It's here today.
Sorry, did you finish?
I'm done. Yes, sir.
Trev, I'll come back to you, D. Don't watch nothing. Trev, does the system, and this being a man who's recently run away from teaching within the school.
Shake your hand.
He's free. Right now he's running in the woods.
That is a different introduction. Does our schools preparing children for the real world? I think it is preparing them for the world as they would like it to be. So with everything that Brother David just spoke about, I feel like in many ways they are preparing children to be passive. They're preparing children. One of the things that's come up a lot now, there was a report that came out a couple of years ago where they had they surveyed like business leaders, and they were talking about school leavers lacking problem solving skills, communication skills, and they were saying, that in this modern world that these are the skills that children need to have, but they don't necessarily have it. And when I look at the school system, how it's set up, I think it's actually made the children are supposed that's actually the process, that's the goal, even though they say it's not. I feel like to have imagine if all children were educated to be critical thinkers and to be like, it doesn't work, it doesn't serve the society. I remember reading, I can't remember the author I was reading, but he was saying the purpose of the school system is to duplicate the status quo. So to actually go against that and to try and, we want critical thinking students, that actually goes against the grain now. That doesn't maintain the status quo.
I know the book, and his first name's Neil, and I can't remember his surname, but
it will come back. So for me, I think it's purposeful and deliberate. There's really only a certain number of people that, in order to maintain the status quo, there's only a certain number of people that they want trained in that way who are going to be taking charge of things. One from my experience being in school, what I came to realize a lot of the time was a lot of the higher achieving children, the children who were put on a pedestal, it was those that were quite easy to teach. They were well behaved, they could memorize things, but people didn't. What I started to realize, a lot of the children that people thought were doing well because of the tests and stuff, these children didn't necessarily, or hadn't yet necessarily learned how to actually think for themselves, how to actually probe and solve problems. They just knew they could memorize procedures, and they got really good at following the instructions, and they wanted your attention, but they hadn't for themselves yet actually learned how to think outside the box. But that was praised, that kind of behavior. And it's like, as you go forward in life, you start to realize the world that we're in right now doesn't work unless you can secure some sort of job. Do you know what I mean? In the world that we're living in, you need more different kinds of skills now.
At the risk you will take me all the way to the ad break.
No way. Don't be like this.
Go for it. Same to you.
Look, they have think tanks the same way that we're putting them together today. Everything they do is by design. It's by design of committee. They've studied, they've picked over, they've been anthropologists, they've applied this stuff for 100 years. They've had class systems for 1,000 years. It's a country of serfs and landowners. And ultimately it will go back to that. And you see that with gentrification. So the fact that our children are given this, it's not so much educational camps now. These are processing centres, which in its true sense now, when you are educated and given a qualification from 1 to 9, it's a true processing camp. But our children aren't sausages. Our children, we need to be proficient and functional in life, emotionally as people, with critical thinking, because then they serve their community. So the reason that we are stopped at every juncture is because we are the first people in terms of service. There's another thing that came to me as an epiphany from the portrait gallery. They don't want us to do well. They don't want us to separate. They don't want us to repatriate. But then they don't particularly want to keep us either. So when you have us dangling in this purgatory, what you can do is have a God complex and always say, well, that's the problem over there. They're lazy. They're uneducated. They don't serve each other. And this is the whole purpose of us realizing why we are by ourselves and have to depend on ourselves, because that is our status. We are in a purgatory by design because we can always be the scapegoat.
Define
It's very
purgatory
easy.
for me.
We are in a place which is neither here nor there. Now, some exceptional individuals will always escape. And then there is an ability to say, well, you're not like them. You're different. You were always special. You were always more like us. But when I was in school, I had a lion spirit. I said I wanted to be a BBC cameraman. I actually wanted to be a film producer. And the careers teacher said, I don't think that's realistic for you, okay? What I said to him is, sir, you can't judge my potential based on your limitations because you're going on strike next week. Don't earn enough money. My mum said she won't get out of bed for your money. No, it was. And it was. He kicked me out of the class and he shouted. He was very angry. But I had a spirit that I never listened and I never believed. But what I understand from watching my colleagues in school is that there was always an intention, be it through training, be it through a lack of empathy, to break our spirits. It was always an intention to break our spirits. And I saw that.
Yes.
And I felt like I was in a concentration camp. I used to watch these movies like The Great Escape.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at a teacher. I don't care what you're saying because I know what I'm going to do. I sold things in school which people did not know, but I would not say. My mum knows exactly what it was. When I was drawn into the headmistress office, I was wrong from morning. I was the young man who would go into a paper shop, take the magazine from the top shelf, tear out the pages and sell them to young men at school because I knew there was a need.
And you was tall.
And I was tall. So I was an entrepreneur from morning. So
Yes.
I never based what I did on the limitations of what a teacher told me. However, what I know is that when it comes to the mass of us, it's not every one of us that is going to do that, which is why we need institutions that represent all of
Take
us.
that and be able to share that.
Absolutely.